Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. Extremely excited for this video to finally come out one day before the NBA draft. We are just about there. Today is actually my golden birthday, and I'm extremely excited to share my final 2024 NBA Draft Big Board with you all. This has been a highly anticipated video, one that I've been extremely excited to record, share upon, and obviously the conclusion of a whole lot of hard work, not only just this year in the draft cycle, but even going back to multiple years in the past, watching a lot of these either upperclassmen or high school kids at the time when they were in high school. Thinking back 3-4 years ago, I've been watching these players for a long time. Obviously, the end of the cycle is always super rewarding. I'm extremely excited for it. I hope you guys are as well. So now, let's actually jump into that video preview here. And if you guys remember last year, my board's going to look a little bit different, but I want to explain exactly how it's all going to work so that everyone's following along with me here. This is my final 2024 NBA Draft Big Board. It is my top 60. Remember to check out the final mock draft on the channel. This is very different than a mock draft. A mock draft is what I think will happen. This video is what I necessarily would do maybe, or how I'm ranking the players. I think is the best way to look about it. How do I feel about each prospect? And I've always had an issue with how NBA draft boards look and how non-descriptive they are and how you just kind of give a generic number ranking, and then from there it's like, well, this is what I thought, I guess. I have this player one spot ahead of this other guy. It's kind of a difficult way to really, truly encompass what you feel and how you think about prospects. So I have a completely different style of board. I debuted this board last year. It's going to be improved upon this year. I made a couple of changes to make it even better. I'm extremely excited for it. If you guys do enjoy the content today, make sure to leave a like and subscribe for more. Thank you to everyone. Leave comments as well. It lets me know either who you're a fan of or just let me know what players you like in this year's draft. I just want to hear from you guys. I love reading the comments, read every single one on the channel. So let's get into this board. How does it actually work? The first thing that is super important, there are multiple levels. You see down here on the bottom left, I've got levels such as greatest of all time or an all-time great. You have Hall of Fame, All-NBA, All-Star, potential. We have quality starter, which means you're about a top 3-ish guy in your team, maybe top 4 if you have a really good team. Are you a starting level player, which means you're a top 5 or 6 player on your roster? Are you a role player, which means you're going to be in the top 8, especially a playoff role player is more what I'm looking at. Someone who's not going to get cut out of the rotation come postseason time. Then depth pieces are guys who probably do play regular season minutes, but get excised from the rotation once you get to playoff time. So a depth piece is someone who is going to be the 9th to 12th guy on your roster typically. End of bench are going to be the last few guys on standard NBA deals, the 13th to 15th guys. Then we have fringe roster spots. Those are the two-way contracts in my estimation and out of the league. Obviously, the worst thing that can happen for any of these prospects that get drafted is they don't last in the league very long. So that is the bottom level. That is the worst level. Now let's explain how these tiers, how this board's going to work. Up here in the top right, you're going to notice a few different things. First of all, I've got 3 theoretical players in here. I've got player Y, player Z, and player X. And this is important to follow along with so you understand how my board is going to work. The top of the bar, the very top of the bar, is the player's perceived ceiling, the way I feel about this player. So if we scroll over here, player Y, I believe, has the ceiling of a potential all-NBA player. The bottom of the bar is that player's perceived floor. So I believe player Y has the perceived floor of a starter. Player Z, has the ceiling of an all-star and the floor of a high-quality starter. So there is real differentiation here between these players. Player Y, I think, has all NBA potential, but maybe doesn't have quite the floor that player Z does. And I think this is the best visual demonstration of that. I want to be very clear. I want to be very precise in how I feel about these prospects and showcase it in a way that is very evident to you guys. I want to talk about their floors, ceilings. I want to talk about everything a player has to offer. And I feel like this is the best way to do it. Player Z looks like a much safer bet than player Y in terms of the low-end outcomes, but maybe you don't get that high-end outcome either by drafting player Z. And for that reason, I would have player Y on my board in this hypothetical, again, completely made up. Player Y is my number 1 player in the draft, which is still indicated by that typical draft number there in pink. I hope this is extremely clear. If you guys do have any questions that arise during the video, first of all, I'll try and be very specific and very precise in the video to explain exactly how I feel. But then secondly, don't be afraid to ask in the comment section. I'm going to be reading comments, replying to you guys. So let me know in the comment section if you guys have any questions. So let's get a drum roll here now. I'm extremely excited, and let's jump into it. Starting at the bottom, this is for all those NBA draft sickos. If you guys want to know about the players near or at the bottom, I'm extremely excited to be talking about them here. So a lot to cover, a lot to talk about, but I am extremely excited. And starting at number 60, remember I'm doing my top 60 in this video, I have Reese Beekman from Virginia. For his perceived ceiling, you can see he's a possible fringe roster spot, someone who I could see being on two-way contracts for a majority of his career. Obviously at the bottom of the floor for quite a few of these players currently on the screen, it is out of the league, unfortunately. That's just kind of the nature of the beast here when you're talking about prospects in your 50s through 60s range. That's kind of exactly what you're expecting. But Reese Beekman, some of the reasons I do like his upside, I like his defensive feel, I like his offensive feel, his ability to get downhill, slash, create opportunities for others as a playmaker. Now, he played in a school that really values defense at Virginia. That was very evident in his film, obviously. But then also, that kind of hampers some of his offensive talent too, with the scheme that Virginia runs, the way that they kind of pack the paint a little bit more, and the lack of real pace and space in their offense does hamper someone like Reese Beekman. And just with him being a smaller guard who doesn't really shoot a ton of threes and doesn't shoot at a super high clip, that is going to be a little bit of a red flag on his draft process. But I do like some elements to his game, and I do think he could stick around maybe on a two-way spot for a while. Pelle Larsson, a very different player. I think one thing I'm concerned about is how physical is he going to be in the NBA? Is he going to be able to really handle the physicality of the league? Now, he does have a smooth shooting stroke. He can score the ball a bit. He is a little bit of a combo guard. I think he's good with the ball in his hands a little, but probably fits more as a wing in the NBA. And then that's where the physicality comes into question. Is he going to be able to guard up the lineup very much? I have some questions about that. You can see I'm not very high on his overall ceiling, especially even compared to Reese Beekman. There's not too drastic of a difference between these two from their ceiling, but ultimately it is something to just keep in consideration given their current situations. Armel Traore, definitely an interesting prospect to talk about, one that I've had on my radar for quite a while now. Was with the Metropolitans 92 last year, when Victor Wembanyama was still there with Bilal Coulibaly, and he's a French-born wing, and I think for upside here, you can see his upside's a little bit higher than Pelle Larsson, a little bit higher than Reese Beekman, and it's because I do think with his overall athletic traits and the physicality he can play with and some of his downhill dynamism as a slasher cutter, there is a little bit of hope that he could stick on in the NBA in some capacity. I do have concerns about him. I think if you're going to draft Armel Traore, he's probably going to be a draft and stash. He'll probably stay overseas, play another year or two in France before you bring him ultimately over to the United States. But Armel Traore is an intriguing wing prospect. Have him currently ranked 58th on my board. Then we get into some guys I could see even sliding into the end of bench roles, where the 13th, 15th guy on the roster. Kevin McCullar Jr. out of Kansas is one that stands out to me. He's an older prospect, spent some time at Texas Tech before transferring to Kansas, and had some really productive years for Bill Self and the Jayhawks. I don't want to discredit him at all as a college talent. He was an incredible collegiate player for sure. Part of the issue I see with him, though, is he good enough at any singular trait to get reliable, consistent minutes on the NBA court? For me, kind of reeks Wendell Moore Jr. a little bit. If you look at former first-round pick of the Minnesota Timberwolves, he hasn't ever really found consistent playoff run or, rotation run, because he is just not someone who sticks out in any real way. He's kind of fades in and out of games, and I think Kevin McCullar Jr. Doesn't have a real standout trait either that will get him serious NBA minutes. Now, I do think with his size and frame and his collegiate success, he is someone who has a chance to stick in the NBA for a little while, but I don't think he's going to have the most fortuitous career, unfortunately. And that's something I want to say here too. I really hope all of these guys work out. That's one thing when you go through this, some people are going to get upset at me about where I have certain players. The one thing I'm hoping is that all of these players become very good in the NBA, because one, that would raise the level of competition. Two, you never want to see young kids, players I've spent a lot of time evaluating, fail. I don't want to see them not reach their goals, reach all of their dreams, and I hope all of these kids end up having great NBA careers ahead of them. The reality, though, is they probably won't. So I do have to have some criticism and some harsh reality at times in these evaluations. I don't love doing that, but it's just part of the beast overall. Then we have two shooting big men back-to-back here at 56 and 55 on my board. PJ Hall from Clemson, who has a pretty nice inside game as well. And then Quentin Post, who has stood out during part of the draft process and I think really started to gain some make some real strides in the end of the draft process, especially around the draft combine, around that kind of week or so in there. Just with his shooting and PJ Hall's shooting, I think they are unique big men. We're going to be able to stretch the floor a bit and probably stay in the NBA in some capacity, mostly on two-way contracts or sticking around as kind of that 13th to 15th guy on a roster. I think that's one thing that's really valuable this time of year, especially playoff time, and having big men off the bench who can shoot is just a unique talent that not every big man can provide. In this big board, we're going to talk about a whole bunch of big men. Most of them can't shoot. So having bigs who can shoot, stretch the floor, it gives teams a unique like third or fourth center to carry on their roster, because if injuries hit, all of a sudden you have this big man who can step on the floor, space you out a bit. Kind of reminds me of Matthew Hurt, who played this year for the Memphis Grizzlies, former Mr. Basketball in Minnesota, and someone who had a really good college career at Duke. Quentin Post, PJ Hall, I think can fit that kind of role a little bit in the league, and if they get the right opportunities, the right time, they can probably stick around in some capacity. Juan Nunez, a player I do like quite a bit. I'm very intrigued by his overall game for a few different reasons. Nunez has really good passing feel. I have him 54th on my board because I do have questions about the scoring gravity and the ability to put a lot of pressure on defenses on his own without having to just make reads and catching the defenses off guard or sleeping in certain actions. I think he's going to be a really, really great EuroLeague type of player. And that doesn't always translate to the NBA. That's just the reality. You think about some guys who had very good overseas careers and they come over to the NBA and it just isn't the right fit. Thinking about Milos Teodosic, thinking about Marcelo Huertas. There's been a lot of opportunities for some guards, especially guys who can make high-level reads and really feel the game well, to come over to the NBA, and it's just a different basketball game. And that's not to diminish the EuroLeague, it's just a different style of play. So Juan Nunez, who I think would be a tremendous long-term EuroLeague guard, I have questions about how he's going to fit in the NBA, but with his passing vision, his size, and his skill, I do think there's a good chance he could stick around in the league for a while if he falls into the right situation with the right kind of surrounding pieces around him. Cam Spencer, I've talked about a lot lately, it feels like, on the channel. I do like Cam Spencer's game. I think he just made a bunch of winning plays for UConn, and it's hard to evaluate a player through the lens of winning because it really is reliant on the construct of the team around him, the quality of the coach, the quality of the other talent. But Cam Spencer is someone who can fit around that kind of talent with his shooting prowess and his ability to play bigger than he is. I think that's something that really stands out to me. Every time I watch UConn, it just feels like he's getting his hand on the basketball, he's making winning plays, collecting loose balls, rebounding against a bigger guy, boxing out, winning some of those little tiny battles that don't seem like a big deal, but over the course of a game, all of those things add up quite a bit. And I think with his shooting and the ability to make some of those timely winning plays, if a team grabs him and likes him, I could see him fitting like a really niche role as an off-the-bench shooter. Yes, it's still going to be hard for him to get consistent NBA minutes. I'm not expecting him to be a rotational player, but I do think there's a pretty decent chance that Cam Spencer could stick around on two-way contracts. And of course, for these players right now, I'm talking about long-term. Most of these players would be signed immediately to two-way contracts or given like exhibition 10 contracts after the draft. So I'm not talking immediately. I'm talking about like kind of the long-term outlook for these guys' careers. And Cam Spencer is someone I could see sticking around in the league a little bit because of his shooting and some of the winning plays he's capable of making. Moving up the board now a little bit, we move into the low 50s and high 40s. We got Jalen Wells in here from Washington State, and I've kind of centered on him being an end-of-the-bench guy. I think his shooting is something that will keep him on a roster. I also have him kind of being in that fringe roster spot. I could see him kind of hovering between two-way contracts and being like maybe the 14th, 15th man on a roster, similar to what Luka Garza has been for the Minnesota Timberwolves. Obviously, very different players. Jalen Wells is a wing who can really shoot it. Luka Garza is a talented post-scoring big man who's also added really the ability to stretch the floor a bit. But Jalen Wells, I think, is a very solid player, and it kind of speaks volumes to the talent of the NBA right now. Some of these players are good. They just don't really have the real role afforded to them to really get significant runs, significant minutes, unfortunately. So that's just kind of the nature of the beast. At 51, I have Ulrich Chomchi from Cameroon. Spent some time playing in the Basketball African League. I do like his skill set quite a bit, especially with his passing feel, and I will say he has a lot of those physical traits that are very intriguing and impressive from an upside standpoint. Now, there are some real flaws. He's extremely raw. You're going to see, as a result of that, I have him as someone who could very easily fall out of the league pretty quickly, because it's going to take a supportive coaching staff. It's going to take a smart coaching staff who knows how to build him from the ground up. That's dangerous, but from an upside standpoint, he's someone I could see really being able to accomplish a lot. He's got a significantly higher upside than a lot of the other guys I have similarly ranked on my board, because I do think if everything hits, his playmaking feel, his sheer size and athleticism, the ability to perhaps protect the rim once he kind of figures out the defensive positioning component of defense, he could be a very unique defensive-minded big man with some passing feel offensively. We have two bucket getters at 49 and 50, Judah Mintz from Syracuse and Antonio Reeves from Kentucky. You're going to notice I think Antonio Reeves is the significantly safer selection as someone who could be an end-of-the-bench scoring guard off the bench. He's not going to really fill that role. He'll never be a sixth-man type of player. There's a reason he's 49th on my board. But from an optimistic viewpoint, you look at his shooting, that is one of the most translatable things to the NBA. Guys who can shoot the ball typically are capable of sticking around for a while, finding a role, and staying in the NBA for some time. Now, he's not much of a playmaker. He's not much of a creator for others, and he is, not a huge guard. He's, I think, got prototypical size for the position he's going to play. But how does he end up turning into a good NBA player? I'm not exactly sure if that's in the cards for him. He's 23 years old already. He's a quality player for sure, a great player at the college level. I could see him sticking in the NBA because of his shooting, but that's really the name of the game for Reeves. And then Judah Mintz is someone who, the upside is really immense. You notice where I have his upside kind of going up too. I think he's someone who could maybe carve into a rotational piece or a depth piece at the very least. Someone who could maybe be the 9th to 12th guy in a roster if things go right for him. For Chomchi, I even had maybe there's the chance that he makes a top 8 rotation down the road. Now, I'm not very positive on that, clearly, and I'm not very hopeful for that, but it's possible because of some of the traits he has. And Judah Mintz, I really like his ability to handle the rock. I think he's got a creative game. I think he's someone who's going to be able to generate opportunities, scoring opportunities for himself, but he's also just not a good shooter yet at this point. He's been very inefficient, and as a result, you can see my floor for him is kind of painting him as someone who could fall out of the league relatively quickly. Now up to the mid-40s here, and it's an interesting group of guys. We've got Jonathan Mogbo at 48 from San Francisco, Cam Christie at 47 from Minnesota, Terrence Shannon Jr. at 46 from Illinois, Tristan Newton at 45 from UConn. I want to talk about this grouping of 4 really quickly. Mogbo is someone who I think is going to have a real deal of suitors, someone who's going to have a lot of interest on draft night. He'll probably get drafted before pick 48 if I had to guess. Remember, this is my overall big board, not where I'm expecting them to get selected. It's a very different situation. I think for Mogbo, the defensive upside is very real, and that's something that could get him on the NBA court for sure, which is why I have him as a potential top 8 rotation piece and a very possible depth piece for a team. I think that's very, very possible, very, very likely even because of his defensive upside, because of what he's capable of providing to an NBA team from a defensive versatility, flexibility standpoint. The question I have for him is offensively, how does he factor into winning? What kind of skill set does he bring offensively? You can't really post him up. He's not big enough to be this elite above the rim lob threat. He doesn't provide a ton of rim gravity. Now he's extremely athletic, and he does have an impressive physical body, but I just don't know how it's going to translate offensively, if he's skilled enough to really play on the offensive end or not in the NBA. Cam Christie, very skilled offensive player. I think some of the questions for me are kind of the inverse of what's true for Mogbo. Christie's a guard, and he's rather light, skinny, just like his brother Max Christie was. Cam Christie's got some of the same flaws in terms of the physicals, the ability to play through contact, finish through contact, but what he does have, just like his brother, is a very smooth shooting stroke. And I think if, with the value of the three-point shot especially, and the value of shooting in today's game, someone like Cam Christie could find himself playing for 5 to 9 years in the league because of his shooting. And then who knows, over the next couple of years, he could take big strides forward in the physicality of his game. He could really bulk up a little bit in an NBA weight room. He's probably not going to put on a ton of weight, but maybe he puts on 10, 15 pounds of muscle, kind of changes the outlook of his career a bit. And that's one thing too about evaluation is I'm taking these players where they're at right now and trying to project where they can be realistically in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That's very tough to do because sometimes decisions change in these young kids' lives. Like they take something super seriously, they get introduced to a different kind of weightlifting or a different kind of dietitian program, and all of a sudden they turn into completely different players because of the results of some of those changes in their life. So, once he's a professional and maybe he's treating his body a different way and taking care of himself a different way, with his skill set that he has, maybe he could definitely overachieve this number 47 ranking that I currently have him at, but that's where I'm sticking for now. I don't know if he's going to be more than a role player in the NBA. Terrence Shannon Jr. of Illinois obviously was very affected by his off-the-court situation this year. I don't want to touch on that too much, but I feel very, very bummed for him. I do think he is someone, as you can tell from where I have his floor and ceiling, I think he's going to stick around in the NBA for a while. I'm very optimistic about that. Tristan Newton, I like his overall feel for the game, his ability to control a game. If you go back to the national championship against Purdue, I felt like Tristan Newton really dominated that game with his decision-making, the pace of the game, the way he controlled it, the way he possessed the basketball. Those are elite guard skills. Now, he was elite at them in the college ranks. It's a very different game in the NBA and a lot harder to just be a game manager, especially with the emphasis on scoring now. It's hard to just have a game manager running your point guard spot. So, Newton, who I think can defend, and I think with his size and ability to control the game, there's definitely value here. It's just about the scoring profile. How does he assert himself offensively? How consistently does he do so at the NBA level? I'm not really ready to bet on that quite yet, but I could see him sticking in the league as a depth piece. One thing about backup guards, coaches love it when they're able to come in and control the game, and that's what I think Tristan Newton is going to be able to fit into in the way he's going to be able to effectively play. 44, I have Jalen Bridges. 43, I have Dylan Jones. 42, I have Bronny James. 41, Enrique Freeman. 40, Jalen Tyson. That's going to be one of the hot takes in this video, I'm assuming, for most people. I'm sure that's going to be one that's heavily commented on. And 39, Nikola Jurisic from Mega Me. So let's jump into first here, Jalen Bridges. He likely will translate to being a 3-and-D type of wing in the NBA. Now, the one thing that's hard about that, once you're already kind of a 3-and-D-esque wing in college, it's really hard to ramp up to the NBA, especially with the speed. The closeouts are better. There's a lot more length and athleticism around you. If you're already not a super high volume, super high usage, dominant college player, it's going to be hard to just simply translate into becoming a 3-and-D plus player in the NBA. So I think Bridges' ceiling is a little capped because of that. But I do think overall his skill set with his length and athleticism and his shooting touch gives him a pretty safe floor as well. I think he can fit into the league as an off-the-bench option for some team. Again, probably a depth piece more likely than not. Maybe an end-of-the-bench guy, maybe a top 8 rotation if things go really well in his career and he takes some steps forward that are much needed. But Jalen Bridges, to me, I probably just think he's going to be like the 9th, 10th, 11th guy in your roster long-term, and that's okay. That's okay. That's part of what makes this class very attractive is I think there's a lot of guys who can fit into roles and really expand their careers and extend their careers because of their ability to fit around other talent. Dylan Jones is a unique discussion point because he doesn't really fit super smoothly around other talent. Kind of reminds me of Taylor Horton-Tucker a little bit. Now, they're very different players, but Dylan Jones at Weber State had the ball a ton, and he was very productive because of it. He also has a very strong physical frame. Taylor Horton-Tucker, obviously, his arms are incredibly long, as Jay Billis would say. They go on for days. Dylan Jones doesn't have that type of length to him, but he's really, really muscular. He's built like a truck, built like an ox, if you want to say, and he's able to handle the ball and create his own shot. The question for me is he ever going to be allowed to do that in the NBA? And the answer is probably not. So for me, I do have questions about how he's going to be able to adjust his game, but with his overall productivity in college, his ability to make things happen, especially late in shot clock, that's when he's going to have some opportunities in the league to actually showcase himself a little bit more. I think there is a role for him. It's probably not as a high minutes per game guy, But I could see him finding an opportunity to stick around somewhere because of his overall collection of physical traits, his size, and his skill set. I think he's going to be able to showcase himself just enough to stick around for a while in this league. Now here's going to be a hot button topic. Bronny James at number 42. And this is one where, remember, we have to be forward thinking in our evaluation. We are not just ranking these players solely off of the college season that they just had, because if we were doing that, your board would look significantly differently. Like, Bronny James is a player who, if you're looking at the long-term potential outcomes for him, there is a lot to be enamored with his overall IQ, the way that he feels the game, the way that he plays the game, because defensively, I think he's extremely cerebral. I think he's someone who, on the defensive end of the floor, is going to very well be able to impact games. Now, he doesn't have a ton of defensive versatility because he is only about 6'1" with shoes on, without shoes on, so he's a smaller prospect. He's probably not going to be able to guard up in the lineup super consistently, but I do see him as someone who could be an off-the-bench guard for you to match up with other teams' point guards. If you look at the types of TJ McConnells or the Jose Alvarado's, that's the type of player that you would hope Bronny James could maybe turn into, blossom into. I know people have been comparing him to a Drew Holiday. I think that's really, really ludicrous. I think Drew Holiday is a lot better than Bronny James, but it is that still kind of same player who is going to be connective. The intent is on his defensive acumen, his ability to make plays on the defensive side of the ball. And then offensively, I think there are some flaws here too to talk about. He didn't shoot it well at USC. I'm not really going to take all of the USC stuff into account because I don't think the system was really well set up for them to find success, especially playing with Isaiah Collier. I think had some real downfalls for some of those players there at USC in certain extents. But one thing about Bronny James that I do have to say, in a negative way, he's very reliant on his floater. I think for him to take big steps forward in his career, he has to find ways to get to the rim consistently, find ways to get to the rack and become more of a downhill scorer instead of reliant on those little 14 to 17 foot floaters, which aren't very efficient, and most teams are going to be very happy with you taking those, especially if you're Bronny James. Enrique Freeman at 41, I think a pretty safe selection, someone who's going to get on the glass for you. His archetype's kind of been phased out of the league a little bit at the power forward spot where, rebounders are valuable, but they're not heavily utilized, and there are some flaws with trying to play that type of player compared to just adding shooting on the court or more positionless playmaking. So I'm not sure exactly what Freeman's future looks like in the league, but I do think I could see him sticking around as a depth piece because people are going to look at his physicals. Obviously, he had a very good, strong combine week for himself that really made him stand apart from some of the other players, some of the other prospects in this class. I do have him at 41. I think that's a pretty fair ranking for him. Jaylon Tyson at 40, that's going to be, the hot button one, where people are going to say that's really, really low for Jaylon Tyson. I just have problems myself with buying into some of the upside. I think there's a little bit of a focus issue with him being able to finish at the rim consistently. He does have the quality size. He has the ability to handle the ball for his position decently well. But if you look at a lot of his success and his productivity this past year for California, a ton of that came out of schemed sets, whether that was him being the receiver on a chin action and catching the ball unimpeded around the rim, or was that him functioning off of a zoom action dribble handoff where he's catching the ball at the free throw line, already an advantage. And while yes, that's good that he's functional and plays off of those actions and those sets really well, one of my biggest concerns are teams really going to cater parts of their offense in certain set plays to get Jaylon Tyson the ball. And I do have skepticism about that. In the NBA, I'm not sure if I believe in his first step. I'm not sure if I believe enough in his handle to be able to consistently create separation. I do like Jaylon Tyson. I think he's an NBA player. I think he's going to have a nice long NBA career. I think he'll be in the league for more than 5 years. I feel pretty confident in saying that. I just think his overall role, though, is going to be a little not super enticing or exciting, kind of like what I would say Chris Duarte has been in the NBA. I didn't love the Chris Duarte pick in the lottery when the Pacers made that pick a few years ago. Jaylon Tyson, very likely a first-round pick. So similar to Chris Duarte, just because you're a first-rounder doesn't mean you're going to have this long, super fantastic career, but I think Tyson's going to have a long and decent career. And that's an okay thing. It's okay to say that because, I'm hoping for the best for him. I hope he has a fantastic career. I hope he really exceeds my expectations, but I just have questions about how teams are going to look to utilize him and if he's going to be at the forefront of the offense very much there. Moving on now into my firm top 40 here, and this is where we start to get to some of those real top 8 role players, guys who can really fit into rotation. There's guys in here that I think can carve out careers for themselves. You look at Nikola Topic, who I have at 39, and then I have a tie actually at number 38 between 2 prospects. So you kind of get a little bit of a bonus here. 2 guys who fit at number 38, so I actually talked about 61 prospects in this draft for you guys. But that's also Ighodaro from Marquette and Pacom Dadier from Ratio Farm Ulm, a German team. He's originally French-born. Let's talk about Jurisic first. I like his playmaking feel. I like his overall positional size. He's going to be a 6'7" guard. That's without shoes on, so he's probably a little bit closer to 6'8", 6'8.5". And he's got a 6'8" wingspan. So positionally, you're going to have a bigger size player, and he's capable. He's shown during his time at Mega Mies the ability to create his own shot off the bounce. Now, some of the questions are about the efficiency of that. I think the week of the Combine was a very important and good week for him. Not only did he measure in well, like I talked about, but he also played off the catch extremely well in the scrimmages. And I think that was one of the big questions for him coming into that Combine, was concerns about how he would fit around another lead ball handler, a lead creator. For Mega Mies, he was tasked with being one of those primary creators, and he does have a flair for the eccentric as a facilitator. Throws a ton of behind the back passes. He's extremely crafty and creative with his ability to pass the basketball. At times that leads to turnovers, but at other times it leads to unbelievable highlight reel type of plays. So I think Jurisic, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit for him to clean up in his game, and that's partially why right now I could see him, if he doesn't clean those things up, kind of being an end-of-the-bench guy only. But with his overall talent, his feel for the game, and his feel as a passer, and some of the scoring upside he's shown so far, I do see him as someone who could maybe fit in as a long-term depth piece. And if everything goes right, and if you really clean up all of those flaws in his game, I think he's got the requisite athleticism and positional size to maybe become a top 8 rotation player on a team, which would be awesome for him. That'd be absolutely fantastic. Dadier and Ighodaro, both at number 38. Let's start with Ighodaro. I haven't talked about him a ton this draft cycle. Honestly, I should have talked about him more. I really like his playmaking feel. I like his passing vision. A lot of it comes stationary, standing around the top of the key, being a hub of their offense, therefore Marquette, but that doesn't make it a bad thing. You look at Nikola Jokic, a ton of his passes are stationary. And with how teams are going to guard Ighodaro, especially in drop coverage when he's a screener, and with some of the ways that teams look to guard, elbow post-ups and things like of that nature, Ighodaro, probably you're going to be able to utilize his passing vision in a number of different ways, both as a dribble handoff guy, which I think could be really valuable if you have a lot of shooting around him. You could look to back cut as well. Ighodaro has shown at Marquette the ability to fit passes into tight windows, and he has a really unique floater. A lot of touch, a lot of finesse to his game. Now, I do think part of the concerns I have is he able to play that physical brand of basketball that you're going to need him to play as an NBA center, which is partially why I have questions on if he's actually going to be a top 8 role player. But I do think with his overall IQ, feel for the game, he's someone who's going to stick around in the league for a very long time. You can see I have a very high floor for him as well, basically guaranteeing that he'll be on a roster for a while in the league. I do like his feel. I like his talent. I think he's going to have a real staying power in the NBA in some form or another. Pacom Dadier, a player who I think has a lot of potential to grow into, especially as a shot maker and a scorer. In his time in Germany, playing for Ratio Farm Ulm, he has showcased the ability to consistently, reliably make outside perimeter jump shots. Also does a very good job attacking closeouts, getting to the rim. If I had to describe him in 4 words, I would probably say play off the catch. I think that's at the heart of his game. That's when he's at his best, is catching on the wing and making a quick decision, whether that's pulling the trigger on a three-pointer, or if that's attacking closeout with one dribble and pulling up for a 17, 18-foot mid-range pull-up jump shot. Or maybe it's 2-3 dribbles and getting all the way to the rack to finish there. He's been efficient in all of those areas, especially if you look at his shot chart. I've been very impressed with Dadier from his early returns playing professional basketball. I think it's going to be a long while until we see him finding consistent success in the NBA, but I do think he could be a very likely upside swing for a team maybe in the late 20s. Very possible he could go in the first round still at this point in time, and I do think long-term there is some unique talent to work with there. especially from a scoring perspective. He's not going to be a primary scorer for a team, but I do think he could provide scoring off the bench most likely for a roster. We move into my top 37 now, and I do like this overall collection of players. Trenton Flowers, for me, someone I've been relatively high on all draft cycle. I think just with his frame, size, athleticism, he stands out to me as a guy who's going to stick around in the NBA because you don't really teach 6'7", you don't teach jumping extremely well, and you don't teach a 41% three-point percentage playing professional basketball in Australia. For the LA 36ers, Trenton Flowers didn't have a ton of opportunities, but when he did, he made the most of them, including an incredible fourth quarter where I believe he scored 18 points in one quarter and really willed the 36ers to a win. It was his best game of the season, for sure. His best moment of the season was that game pretty early on in the season. He did deal with some injury stuff, kind of knocked him out of the lineup for a while. Never really fully regained that role that he had early in the year. But Trenton Flowers, to me, someone with all the size in the world. Positionally, I think he's going to be a combo guard. He's not really a point guard, but I think he's capable of handling the rock, bringing it up in transition, and being that secondary creator for an offense where he can make plays off the bounce a bit. And then really the big thing is his shooting. With his ability to stretch the floor, I think there's some real 3-and-D upside here. For me, if I was Trenton Flowers, I'd be watching a ton of Nickeil Alexander-Walker film. I think that's the player he can best mimic in the NBA, winning with quickness, speed, athleticism, playmaking, and shooting. Those are the things that Trenton Flowers projects to be able to do, and if he hits on that and he becomes that type of player, you're looking at a top 8 type of rotation player in the NBA. KJ Simpson, someone that had a really great season for Colorado, one of their best players, if not flat out their best player this past season for the Buffaloes. He had a really tremendous year. He was their go-to guy down the stretch of games and really can generate his own shot and can create for others a bit. Now, obviously, the size component plays into his draft stock. The defensive component plays into it as well. But I could see him becoming a good backup point guard in the NBA, a reliable backup point guard, or a third point guard on roster, someone who could provide some pacing, tempo, quickness, and some shot making from behind the arc. KJ Simpson's a unique prospect, one that I think does have staying power in the NBA because of his overall feel for the game, his IQ, and his ability to make shots from the perimeter. Those are going to be at the heart of his success moving forward. Tyler Smith at 35. This is maybe going to be a surprise one. Some people are really not going to like that, I'm sure. I think G League Ignite prospects typically do get underdrafted, so I think we might be in line for a little bit of a surprise on draft night, considering Tyler Smith, Ron Holland, and Matas Buzelis. We'll see. Right now, I think Buzelis might still be a lock to the Pistons at number 5, but you never know. G League Ignite prospects for years and years and years have been underdrafted. We'll see if that happens again in the 2024 NBA draft in the final iteration of G League Ignite basketball. But Tyler Smith shot the ball relatively well from 3. He has a lot of physical traits that I do like. I think he can jump out of the gym. He's super athletic. And when you give him a runway to the rim, he's going to be able to maximize that with a thunderous dunk. For me, the question is, one, can he guard at the NBA level? And secondly, does that three-point shot stay reliable? And then thirdly, can we get him away from the mid-range game? I just don't think for a player like him who's going to probably slot in as a role player, a contributor off the bench most likely, he can't be shooting 3-4 mid-range shots a game. And he wasn't doing that for G League Ignite, but you can tell that's where his game kind of leads him to as a face-up 4. And the game has really shifted away from that, especially the most efficient teams. You think about Boston, you think about Dallas. They're not having their power forwards face up at the 15-foot mark. They're just not. That's something the Lakers are having Rui Hachimura do. And there's a reason they rank toward the bottom of the league in the offense, despite having LeBron James, maybe the smartest player to ever play basketball. You can't afford for a non-elite power forward to be shooting mid-range jump shots. And that's not just a knock on Tyler Smith. That's something I'm going to say throughout this entire big board. You need your power forward to be able to shoot threes, and his athleticism definitely is going to be a real positive there. I could see Tyler Smith hitting, and I could see him becoming a fantastic rotation player for sure. I could really see that. It's not a guarantee, but I definitely think there's a lot to work with. I see him as a guy who's going to stick in the NBA for a while. My comp for him for a while has been Isaiah Todd, but I think he's better at everything than Isaiah Todd. I just think play style-wise, that's the type of player I see. I've also talked about Terrence Jones. I think probably a blend of those two guys between Isaiah Todd and Terrence Jones, former Houston Rocket. Tyler Smith is a unique blend of those two guys, and I think can have some real success moving forward if he harnesses his game and his shot selection, most specifically, in positive manners. Keyshawn George at 34, Justin Edwards at 33, and Tyler Kolek at 32. For Keyshawn George, he's got all the positional size in the world. I love that about him. He shot the ball really well for the Canes this past year on pretty good volume as well. So those are two really impressive things. I think the questions for me around Keyshawn George is everything else. Is he going to be able to handle the basketball consistently? Can he get his feet set while being a movement shooter rather than just a stationary standstill guy? Defensively, what position is he going to guard? Obviously, he's got the size, but how is the technique going to come along? So for me with Keyshawn George, I do like the overall frame. I like the overall starting point here. Kind of feels like a blank canvas. There's a lot to work with. There's a lot of tools there in the toolkit. Can you harness those tools? Can you put those tools to good use? I think it's going to be very important for Keyshawn George to land with a good development staff. One that I would love to see him land with is maybe the Utah Jazz, someone like Will Hardy and that staff who's already working with a bunch of young players. They've done a great job bringing players along and up to speed so far, in my opinion. I think Keyshawn George needs that type of coaching, but if he gets it, he could definitely well out exceed where I currently have him on my board, and I'm really hoping for that outcome for sure. Justin Edwards, a toolsy wing. I really like his overall collection of strength, athleticism, and enough feel to get by for the position. That's something that every time I watched Justin Edwards, that was the one main thing I was watching for. How's the feel? How's the passing vision? Does he keep his head up when he's dribbling downhill? And for the most part, he does a decent enough job that I think he's going to be not a complete ball stopper. And that's huge for someone like Justin Edwards, who shot the ball decently well. He had, remember that incredible 10 for 10 game earlier this season where he just could not miss a shot. That helped his percentages quite a bit. But throughout the year, especially toward the end of the season, he started to build some of that momentum up, found his rhythm, and I think he's a player, once he's comfortable, he can really start to shine and excel. And we got to see that at the end of the year for Kentucky. Down the stretch of the season, the final 10-15 games or so was much better than the first 10 to 15 games where most people started thinking he might be back for another year. Justin Edwards is a unique athlete, a unique talent, and he shot the ball well enough. I like his release. I like the speed of his shot. He gets his shots up quick, and they look pretty good mechanically. I think for him, it's just about putting a lot of those things together, finding that stability, that consistency, and you're looking at a guy who can be a long-term rotational contributor, which is an awesome pickup, especially if you get him near or around the second round. Number 32, Tyler Kolek. I think for Kolek, really the name of his game is passing feel, passing vision. Someone who I think has a very high floor and a quite low ceiling. For me, there's just not a lot of scoring gravity. Now, he shoots the ball well off the catch. I think that makes him a functional fit next to other star talent, which is really important. For me, that fit makes him just a very seamless addition to any roster. Now, the question is he good enough to warrant playing 25, 30 minutes a game? I'm not exactly sold on that yet, but I do think he can be a good pace pusher, a tempo setter, and a play initiator for teams. He's very adept in the pick and roll, can make multiple reads, has a good nuance to his pace when he's in the pick and roll to find his big man rolling. Did so a lot with Ighodaro at Marquette, who we've already talked about in this video. So I do think Kolek is a unique option at 32. I could see the Phoenix Suns taking him at 22. I could see the Minnesota Timberwolves considering him at 27 if he's still there. I could see the Denver Nuggets considering him at 28. Very likely Tyler Kolek goes off the board in the first round, and I won't hate that decision because his overall feel for the position, playmaking, his ball security, and his ability to catch and shoot the basketball all make him a well-warranted potential first-round pick in the 2024 draft. 31, we have Johnny Furphy, and I'm actually going to stop it there because I want to talk about number 30 for a while afterward. Johnny Furphy, if he could shoot off the move, he would be much higher on my board, but he is a 6'7" wing with good stationary standstill shooting. For me, again, I'm looking at a guy who's probably going to factor into being some type of role player off the bench for a team, whether that's your 8th guy, 7th guy, or if that's your 9th guy off the bench. For him, he has the requisite athleticism, I think, to be a quality team defender. At times used his body well to cut off drives. At times, though, too, he comes out, he closes out off balance and isn't in the best position defensively to get stops. Now, again, he's very young, freshman. He's going to have time to grow and develop as a player. So you don't take all of his closeouts as a freshman in college and say, oh, he's screwed, he's not going to be a good defensive player. But there are concerns there as well about how consistently, how reliably he's going to be able to do that. He was very active defensively. He wants to be involved defensively. He participates on that end of the floor. He rotates, and he has decent size for him positionally. It's just about, can he athletically keep up with NBA players, or is he going to get excised from playoff rotations because of that? It's something that pretty typically happens with shooters in the NBA. Come playoff time, coaches pull the plug on certain shooters. I don't agree with that decision, but it's just kind of the reality. Johnny Furphy might be liable to that in the future. We'll have to see how his career goes, though, because there is a lot to like. He cuts well, moves without the basketball, and when he does drive the basketball, he actually holds his line pretty well. Some of the things that were impressive to me in my overall film breakdown on him this year. I do like his game, and I like his shooting. If he could shoot off the move, I'd be a lot more thrilled, though, with possibly selecting him. Number 30, and it's Ryan Dunn. And let's go take a look at that ceiling. Possible starter ceiling here for Ryan Dunn. Now, I'm skeptical, and you're going to see in my floor, look at how vastly different he is than everybody else, because I have him potentially out of the league. That is a massive concern for me, because Ryan Dunn was the toughest evaluation of this entire process for me, because my heart tells me, oh my gosh, I love this kid, he is tremendous, and my brain tells me no one is even going to think about guarding him and he's not going to be any good. So I don't really know what to think right now. I'm kind of stuck in the middle. I love him. I think that defensively he's such a unique defensive player. With his overall athleticism, his defensive motor, when you pair those two things together with a great frame and elite wingspan, you get a special talent. And you saw that on tape. You saw that in the box score this year. Had multiple 5-block games, multiple 5-steal games. He had a 7-block game earlier this season. He is incredibly impressive on the defensive end of the floor because his engine never stops ticking. He just makes plays. And as an event creator, as someone who's going to make things happen defensively, even if he gets beat, he recovers well. And that's something I love. In my opinion, he might be the most athletic player in this entire draft. One thing I do have to say about Ryan Dunn, I don't necessarily think he's just flat out a stopper. And that might be something that people say he is, and some people might consider him capable of becoming that. And perhaps he will. I think at this point in time, though, I'm not comfortable saying he's just flat out a stopper. I don't know if he's Herb Jones, really, on the defensive end of the floor, or Jaden McDaniels with their ability to stay connected through screens, cut guys off on drives, not bite on ball fakes, not bite on crossovers, and change of direction dribble moves. I think Ryan Dunn, his footwork has a little bit more to ramp up, but there is a lot to love, and if he does become that player, I don't think he currently is right now as a true lockdown stopper. If he becomes that player, it wouldn't be shocking to me because he has, again, the athletic tools to be that. He's got the size and length to become that, and he has the motor and the want to be that. So I do really like Ryan Dunn. I think that there is a chance that he turns into one of the best draft picks in this entire class because you're probably going to get him in the 20s or 30s in this year's draft, and he could potentially turn into one of the 15 best players if things don't work out for other guys and everything clicks for Ryan Dunn. He could be a tremendous player, don't get me wrong. But if he goes to the wrong situation, goes to a team that just doesn't know how to really utilize his offensive skill set right now, which is very limited, I could see him falling out of the league pretty quickly as well. Now, firmly in the top 30, we get into an interesting collection of players here. Jacoby Walter at 29, Isaiah Collier at 28, Isaiah Crawford at 27. I know that's going to raise some eyebrows. Bobby Klintman at 26, Kyle Filipowski at 25, Tristan Da Silva at 24, Yves Missi at number 23, Jamal Shead at 22, and Adem Bona at number 21. Let's start with Jacoby Walter back at number 29. For Jacoby Walter, the movement shooting's there. My questions are everything else on the offensive side of the floor. He has showcased a handle so far, but a lot of his dribble moves, a lot of his handle results in him taking step-back threes and creating space backward. And while that's a good thing, that means you have to be an elite knockdown shooter. And so far he's been good as a shooter. I just don't know. With the NBA three-point line in mind, he shot it in the mid-30s percentage-wise from three at Baylor, albeit, yes, on some real volume and some tough shot selection. My question is, is that good enough in the NBA? Is he going to be good enough as a shooter in the NBA to warrant him taking difficult shots? And is he going to make enough of those shots to really warrant him having a real role and a lot of play time? I don't see him as a starting caliber player, but I do think off the bench he can function as a possible shooter for a team. I'm trying to make sure that you guys have this starter thing there on the screen, because I do think, you know, even though I don't see him as a starting level player, I do think he has a spot to be in the top 8 rotation for a team and providing shooting off the bench. Isaiah Collier is really the interesting one. Someone who I do see having starting potential, and compared to a lot of the other players in this realm, he has the highest potential out of all of these guys, because I love his quick first step, his ability to get downhill, his ability to absorb contact and play through contact as a finisher at the rim. But there are some concerns as well. He doesn't have elite positional size. He's very much so a below the rim finisher. He's going to be very, very reliant on scoring below the rack at the rim in the lane. And in the NBA, you're going to be met with 7-footers very consistently. You're going to be met with Rudy Gobert, Victor Wembanyama. You're going to be met by even the smaller centers like Bam Adebayo, some of the better defensive bigs in the league. Anthony Davis will be in there. Like, those are going to be challenges for Isaiah Collier scoring the basketball. So as a result of that, his ceiling is a guy who doesn't even really factor in as a depth piece. Or his floor, excuse me. And the reason for that, I know that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows. Some people have Isaiah Collier top 5 on their board. I don't understand what they're watching, because he is a player with his play style, the way he slows the game down, catches the ball and holds it. If he's going to play that way in the NBA, he has to be your best or second best player. And if you're skeptical on him being the best or second best player, he can't afford to play like that. The way that teams play, with the emphasis on role playing, fitting around talent, Isaiah Collier is a very messy fit next to pretty much any star player, because he doesn't defend very well. Not only does he not defend well, but the effort's not consistently there. A lot of times he's missing rotations. He's closing out off balance when he is rotating. There's a lot of defensive flaws. But again, that first step, that quickness, and that playmaking feel are what give me hope that he could turn into a starting level player. As you can see, I'm kind of betting against that. I really hope he proves me wrong, because he's a fun player to watch. I like his back to the basket game as a facilitator. Kind of reminds me of Deron Williams a little bit in that regard. But another comp for him maybe is a Tyreke Evans. And Tyreke Evans was a good player, found success, even won Rookie of the Year in his own draft class. I just don't know, though, if Isaiah Collier, with the way the league has adjusted, the emphasis on shooting, the emphasis on perimeter play, and the importance of perimeter defense and shot creation and shot making, I don't know if Isaiah Collier, whose game is going to be very reliant on finishing below the rim, fits into the NBA that smoothly. Isaiah Crawford, I think, is a very smooth fit into the NBA, because he's going to be a 3-and-D plus wing very, very rapidly in his career. He's an older prospect, a career 39% three-point shooter at Louisiana Tech. He has a very nice jab step, ball fake, drive move, and he gets guys on it all of the time. That's how you know it's a good move, because it works all of the time. Isaiah Crawford is someone who, listen, the ceiling's not there. He'll probably never be a starting caliber player in the NBA, and if he's starting, your team's probably not going to be very good. But what I think he can be is a reliable off the bench option, someone who can come into games and provide shooting, floor spacing. He'll guard the other team's best or second best player, especially if it's a wing type player. He's got the requisite size, and at Louisiana Tech, he was tasked with doing a lot more than he's going to have to do in the NBA. Louisiana Tech, he was creating shots, he was driving the basketball, he was making plays off the bounce. The NBA, that's going to be the plus category of his game, the 3-and-D plus. That's where he's going to be able to showcase some of the things he used to do, and he'll do it with the shot clock expiring, or all of a sudden he's attacking the closeout and making a nice play off the bounce that no one was really expecting or ready for. That's where Isaiah Crawford, some of his past experience is going to show up in film once he's in the NBA. I like his game. I think he's a pretty seamless, smooth fit into the NBA. For me, this kind of bunching here was very, very tight, very kind of hard to choose from, because there's a lot of talent to work with in here. There is. So the talent's bunched up. They're very different types of players. Jacoby Walter's a movement shooter. Isaiah Collier's a downhill point guard, and Isaiah Crawford's a 3-and-D wing. So they're all very different. Bobby Clinton's different than all of those guys as well as a four-man with passing feel. And I always think back to my film study on him last year, watching him at Wake Forest for the Demon Deacons as a unique play finisher, a unique roller with some real short roll feel, could make plays off of a live dribble, and extremely athletic. And I think we saw all of those things for the Cairns Taipans this past year in the NBL with his ability to make reads, attack closeouts, pass the basketball when necessary, but he also showcased that athleticism as a driver. When he's given a clean lane, he's going up and he's throwing that thing down hard. He's got good positional size. He's going to fit into the NBA as a power forward. The biggest question is the reliability of that outside shot, and we've talked about it before. I talked about it with Tyler Smith. I've talked about it with all the power forwards so far. If you're a non-shooting or not an elite shooting power forward, how good can you really be? I think Klintman has a lot of the positive traits in pretty much every single area. I think he's going to be able to defend. I think he moves his feet really well for his size. I think he's going to be able to make reads as a playmaker, as a passer. The question is, does he shoot the ball well enough to warrant real playing time? I hope the answer to that is yes, because I do like his upside. I could see him kind of factoring in long term as a guy who sticks in the NBA for a while. Now, I do have concerns about that as well when it comes to his shooting. If he doesn't shoot the ball well, what role does he really fulfill, and does he even get consistent run in rotations because of that question? Now you can see there's a pretty big gap here between number 26 and number 25. I should have mentioned this earlier. The gap between these cells are the gap that I kind of have between them on my board. So 24 and 25 very close together. 25 and 26, there's a little bit of a gap in between them. So it's one of those visual ways to show kind of where I'm at with these prospects. Kyle Filipowski, I really like his diverse skill set, his diverse scoring profile. He scores as a play finisher, as a roller, as a cutter. He also is able to pick and pop, set his feet from three and shoot it. Now, he hasn't been super consistent. I think one of the age-old questions is, if he's a good shooter, why hasn't he shot it well? Well, that's a big question for him too, because he's got that tweenerism to him. Measured in with a negative wingspan, but he measured in decently well from the height component at the combine. He stands tall. He's going to be able to play kind of either your small ball center or your big ball forward spot. And that's unique, right? There's not a lot of players in this draft that have that positional flexibility between the two, and that's what I think separates Kyle Filipowski from others in this class. Now, you see, I don't have him with that starter upside here because I just am kind of skeptical on how he blossoms as a player. Offensively, I just don't know if you put wings on him, is he going to be able to effectively take advantage of all of those matchups consistently? I think his best bet is as a center, taking advantage of bigs with his speed, quickness, and athleticism on the perimeter. But on the flip side of that, then you're probably sacrificing some rebounding. You're probably sacrificing rim protection as a team. So it's just hard to find a team construct that he fits super smoothly into. Tristan Da Silva, I think, just probably suits in as a good off-the-bench player for a team for a long time. Kind of a Kyle Anderson type player, especially with his playmaking feel. Does leave his feet at times, is prone to turnovers because of that. But I do like his overall passing vision for his size, especially kind of a positionless playmaker. And that's where the NBA is at right now. The more playmaking, the more decision-making you have on the court, the better. And I think Da Silva is someone who's going to be very beneficial in that regard. And with his shooting ability and his finishing at the rim when unimpeded, he's going to be a very solid bench option. I don't see him as a true starter in the NBA. I know some people probably even have Da Silva in the top 10, top 8 even, I'm sure some people have. For me, I'm a little bit lower. I do have some long-term concerns about how he's going to effectively guard in the NBA. What positions will he defend? That's something that's going to be a big separating factor between him and Kyle Anderson. I think Kyle Anderson, a real plus defender, someone who uses his IQ well defensively and his athleticism well. Da Silva, I'm a little bit more skeptical of, but I think in a team construct, he's smart enough to figure it out and be a capable defender, which is why I see him being a long-term bench option. Yves Missi, talk about ceilings and floors. I could see him being a very good starter in the NBA as a center, but he's also so raw right now that I do have concerns about if he's even a depth piece or if he's just flat out only a depth piece because of how raw he is and how new he is to the sport, especially in contrast to Adem Bona, who I think has a very similar ceiling. You see me comparing the two of them here. Adem Bona's ceiling is very comparable to Yves Missi. and the floor is significantly higher in my opinion, because I think Adem Bona has a better feel for the game as a passer, as a decision maker with the ball in his hands. I think defensively has a way better feel for the game. From a positioning standpoint, I just think he knows where he's supposed to be standing, where he's supposed to be on the court way more frequently, and both of them have similar explosion tools. Now, Yves Missi, I think if the upside hits, he's got a little bit more of that quick twitch on the perimeter, is a little bit more comfortable out in space, and uses his body a little bit better to protect the rim, and also still make secondary, tertiary jumps after contesting the first time. He's probably going to be able to continue doing that multiple times and times again. If I had to bet, I think Yves Missi and Adem Bona both hit pretty well and become quality NBA big men, whether that's your backup center or your starter. I think a comp for these two guys, it's not really a super clean comp, but something along the lines of what Daniel Gafford has been in the league. For Washington, if he's one of your better players, you're probably not very good, but once he gets traded to Dallas and he fits in kind of into a center rotation, that's where you find his value, especially next to a real point guard who can put the ball in the air, can make good reads off of pick and roll action. Luka Doncic is probably the best in the world at that, and we saw the benefits for Daniel Gafford as a lob threat, a play finisher. I think Yves Missi, Adem Bona, both of them need to be used that way. Bona was misused at UCLA as a post-up guy. That's not his game. He's going to be a play finisher. He's going to be an above-the-rim lob threat and a dunker. He's going to sit in the dunker spot. He's going to be able to screen and roll, get downhill offensively, just like Yves Missi can. I think if you get the right guard with these guys, they could be really, really awesome. Talking about a good guard, Jamal Shead is a perfect college point guard. Now, there are some concerns about him coming into the NBA. He's a little bit smaller. How is his shot diet going to look? What is he going to be in the NBA? That's a pretty good question, but I do think he's someone who is going to consistently play real minutes, and I think he's going to fit as an off-the-bench guard for sure. Just because he's got that competitive streak to him, he's able to defend without fouling, especially he defends physically without fouling. He utilizes his body extremely well, cuts off drivers a lot, and he's one of the better chasers in all of college basketball in ball screens. He's able to fight over the top. He has very active hands defensively. He was at the heart and soul of Houston's defense and their offense, which is extremely impressive to be that good on both ends of the floor at the college game. I think Jamal Shead, he's someone who most people are going to overlook because he's a smaller guard. He's an upperclassman, but I think for me, I've really settled in on just liking his game, liking the way that he plays, liking the way he carries himself on the floor, consistently just makes the right decision, makes the right read, and makes the easy play offensively. For Houston, that was driving off the wing and, oh, strong side corner help, let me just kick it to the corner for an open corner three. Like, making simple reads like that, simple decisions, it doesn't sound like a lot when you're watching the film. It's not the most impressive thing. It doesn't blow you away going, whoa! But when you consistently do that, when you consistently make those right reads, that's something that really stood out to me. Shead just constantly makes the right play, makes the right decision, makes the right play, makes the right read, and because of that, Houston constantly found success with him on the floor. I think with him in the NBA, he's going to be a very good backup guard. I talked about Jose Alvarado earlier. I think Shead can be a better Jose Alvarado because I think he's a more reliable playmaker, a more reliable player with the ball in his hands, and I think he can give you some of that similar defensive tenacity, albeit quite a bit different than the way Alvarado does it. Alvarado makes it really, really fun. Jamal Shead's just kind of a dog on the defensive end of the floor. Now into the top 20, and the going gets good here. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can talk about these players a little bit more individually. Starting with Tidjane Salaun, I have at number 20. Some of the same questions I posed earlier around Bobby Klintman are similarly true for Tidjane Salaun, in my opinion. I think Salaun is a player who, at number 20 for me, I question the three-point shot. I like the length, the tools, the physical traits, the athleticism. I really like his long speed. I like his short area quickness. I like his rim protection. I like his length. There's a lot to like from the physical components. And if everything hits, if everything blossoms and turns out really well, he could be a really good player. But again, I think the least valuable archetype in all of basketball is non-shooting power forwards. If you are a non-shooting four, it means you're not either big enough or good enough defensively to be a center, or you don't rebound the ball well enough. That would all be true for Salaun. And it means you're also not skilled enough to be a small forward. Because if you're a small forward, it means you're probably handling the ball a decent amount. It means you're a reliable, consistent shooter. Salaun is not that. Salaun, there's a lot of questions about how his shot's going to translate to the NBA. I do think he will be a lottery pick on draft night. I have him at number 20 on my board. I'm skeptical about his long-term fit. Now, it's not to say he can't be impactful and impact winning. All of these guys, Bona, Shead, Missi, De Silva, Philip, I think they can all impact winning very positively. So even with me being low on Salaun, I have him above those guys. I think that there's a chance where if everything goes right in his career, he could be a really tremendous starter and really have a nice high impact on winning. We'll see if he ever realizes that potential. It really is going to a lot's going to hinge on that actual shooting. But there are a lot of awesome traits to work with, and if you get the right coaching staff and the right pieces around him, Salaun could be a really nice piece for sure. Now at 19, I have Carlton Carrington, and you see kind of my floor for him is a low-end top 8 role player, and my ceiling for him is nearly a high-quality starter. I think for Bub Carrington, the biggest thing is his pull-up mid-range jump shot. That's what points to potential stardom here for Carlton Carrington. Now, clearly, I'm not betting on that potential stardom. I think that the overall efficiency on his mid-range pull-ups were very impressive, and the volume he shot them at as well was impressive. The big thing for me, though, is he able to stretch that to the three-point line, yes or no? If he doesn't, then you're not really looking at a super efficient on-ball point guard. And while he's capable of racking up assists and playing with the ball in his hands, I wouldn't also classify him as the best playmaker in this class by any stretch either. So there's areas for him to grow. The nice thing for him is he was not a top 100 recruit, completely outperformed expectations in year one of his freshman season at Pittsburgh, and now going into the draft, maybe he outperforms those expectations again. And there's players who development isn't linear, and sometimes it's exponential. And if you get Bub Carrington with the right coaching staff, put the right players around him, and you slowly harness and focus on certain areas of his game, improving his perimeter jump shot, improving his downhill rim force, those are things that if Bub adds to his game, he could definitely outperform the ceiling I currently have placed on him. I really think if there's an upside grab that hits outside of the lottery, there's a very, very good chance that player ends up being Bub Carrington, so I'm extremely excited to see where he goes on draft night. I think he'll be a fun prospect to watch in the NBA very soon. Let's talk about 3 different big men. They're all very different, but I have them kind of closely bunched together, but they all do a little bit of different stuff on the offensive and defensive end of the floor. Let's start with Zach Edey, who I have at number 18. Probably one of the more polarizing prospects in this entire draft. Some people think he's going to be terrible. Some people think he's going to be absolutely phenomenal and unguardable. I find myself completely in the middle of those two. And I keep seeing people saying Zach Edey is a boom or bust prospect. I don't understand that at all. I don't see where they're getting that from. You're not going to be a boom prospect in the NBA as a post scorer. Okay, that's just the reality. It's not efficient enough offense to be an elite, otherworldly player. Even at Zach Edey's size, that's not going to win NBA basketball games super consistently. And if it was, Zach Edey would have had to rank better than 60th percentile in college as a post-up player. Okay, he's not an elite post player from an actual efficiency, possession-by-possession standpoint. Obviously, his volume was absurd at Purdue, and he draws a ton of fouls, and he does a lot of really great stuff outside of just scoring the ball in post-ups. But there's reasons for some of his inefficiencies to not win in the NBA. Kel'el Ware, completely different. He is kind of an inside-outside game, but also can post up, play with his back to the basket a bit, and is extremely athletic. I think out of these 3, probably presents to be the best above-the-rim lob finisher, although Zach Edey's right there with him. They do it in very different ways. Kel'el Ware does it with his athleticism, his springiness, his bounce. Zach Edey does it with his sheer size and rim gravity, rim pressure. And then DaRon Holmes II is more of a finesse player than these two guys, but is capable of bringing some of that boom as well as a big man, probably standing around 6'10" or so. Can shoot the rock. I like his overall dynamism as a screen setter. That's been the thing I've highlighted the most for him. I think for Edey, if I'm giving a comp, it's a combination of Ivica Zubac and Jonas Valanciunas. You make those two guys a little bit slower, but you make them 5, 6 inches bigger. And that's really an impressive player. And that's why, for me, I don't think it's boom or bust. I think it's, hey, he's going to be good. I have him as a almost surefire starting level center, which you can see I have the floor higher than I do for Holmes, and I have the floor higher than I do for Kel'el Ware, but I also have the ceiling lower than I do for those two guys, because I think with Edey, on the defensive end of the floor especially, there's only a few different ways you can really use him. You can use him as a middle of the floor center in zones, or you can use him as a pick and roll drop coverage big. You can't play him at the level of the screen. He's going to get diced up. He's going to get blown by. He's going to get split at the double. It's not going to age well if you ask him to do that. So that's where the lack of upside stems from. But at the same time, one of the most efficient defensive coverages in the pick and roll lately has been drop coverage, because the entire philosophy stems around stopping teams from getting to the rim, deterring them away from the rim. Edey's going to be able to do that because he's 7'4" with a 9'7" standing reach. He's going to put his hand up and he's almost going to be at the rim. So that's going to be something that deters other teams from shooting around the rim. It's going to force more floaters. It's going to force more mid-range pull-up jump shots. So those are positives for whatever team drafts Zach Edey. The only negative, though, is you get to the playoffs and those star players are the ones taking the mid-range pull-ups. So we've seen teams like the Milwaukee Bucks with Brook Lopez get played off the floor because of that exact issue. So that's something you have to take in mind in your draft philosophy. I'm not very high on drop coverage. I think it's good in the regular season. I think it's extremely flawed in the playoffs. So it's a real challenge to consistently rely on that, in my opinion, unless you have elite, and I mean truly elite, pick and roll defensive guards on your roster. Kel'el Ware, I think more versatility defensively. You can play him a little bit higher at the level of the screen. You can do a bunch of different things with him, but then offensively, it really just stems from his ability to catch, make plays around the rim. He's coordinated enough as a finisher. I think just an impressive prospect with his overall collection of touch, athleticism, and some of the shooting upside that he has pointed to. And then DaRon Holmes II, talking about shooting upside, he shot over 83s this past year for Dayton. The junior prospect is a guy who can really shoot it. He can roll. One of my favorite things about him, he's a short roller, not just as a passer like I've referenced earlier with about like Oso Ighodaro. He's someone who can roll and then make decisions as a finisher from there. Does he want to shoot a right baby hook from 12 feet? Can he get all the way to the rim on a face-up drive? DaRon Holmes just has a nice patience to him as a short roller. Then obviously the ability to pop as well just makes him really dynamic in the screen game offensively. We get into my top 15 here, and let's take a look at number 15 through number 10. It's an interesting group and one that people are going to have a lot of probably difference in opinion with, but that is completely okay. Jared McCain, who I think could possibly turn into a high-quality starter, but more than likely will just be a starting caliber guard in the NBA. I like his game a lot from the component and the mindset of dribble, pass, shoot. He's a very, very, very good shooter, a laser from behind the arc. He can also handle the basketball in the pick and roll. He can make live dribble reads as a facilitator, as a passer. Now, he's not going to pass a ton of guys wide open, but what he's going to do is be able to hit the guys that are already standing wide open. There's a big difference there between those two guys. Someone like Luka Doncic, who I've already referenced in this video as one of the best passers in the world, he passes guys open. Jared McCain, I think, will take advantage of guys who are already open at this point, but as you can see, I have a very low floor, or a very high floor for him as well, as at probably worst a rotation player, as a guy who would maybe even just come off the bench as a shooter because of the easiness of his game. I think he'll just be a very solid, well-rounded player going forward. I don't have a lot of concerns for him. Matas Buzelis at 14. This is one of my bigger ranges in the entire video. Someone who I see having potential all-star talent. Now, I'm not very confident he'll ever realize that all-star potential, that all-star talent. And I'm also concerned that he doesn't even really turn into a reliable, consistent role player, someone that you can play a ton. Because currently, and this can all change because he's very young yet, he has a slight, thin frame. He can't shoot the ball very well. Again, this is the question. He said in interviews that if I shot it better, I'd be the first overall pick. Well, why didn't you shoot it better? Right? Like, you're trying to make him during the games, I would hope. So why didn't you shoot it better? If you're a good shooter, you're probably going to shoot it good. Okay? So that's a concern I have here for Buzelis, who shot in the mid-20s for percentage from three. He's not a good, reliable shooter yet. Now, there's definitely reasons and excuses behind that, whether it's coming back from injury or playing professional basketball at the age of 18, 19 years old. That's very hard to do. So, and then Buzelis is a guy who a year ago I thought would have been in contention for the number 1 overall pick this year. He's not anymore, it seems like, but he is still an intriguing prospect, someone I expect to get drafted in the top 5, top 10 at very worst. there is a lot to like about Buzelis' game, which points to that all-star upside, that all-star potential that I did reference, because of his ability to handle the basketball, his ability to attack downhill. He likes his turnaround jump shot in the mid-range area. He's got a lot of unique traits, but he also has a slower first step. You're probably looking at a power forward in the NBA. I just don't know if he's quick enough, skilled enough to play small forward super reliably. And again, what have I said all video long? The worst thing in the NBA, the least valuable archetype in the NBA, is power forwards who cannot shoot. Matas Buzelis, a lot of his talent, a lot of his ability is going to hinge on his shooting. If he grows as a shooter, develops massively as a shooter, all of a sudden his ability to beat guys off the dribble, attack closeouts, opens up a lot of his game as a downhill player, as a finisher at the rim. I do like his overall collection of athleticism, mobility for his size. All of those things are very impressive. I just have concerns about how ultimately he's going to be able to string all of those things together if he can't shoot the ball reliably. Now at number 13, I have Ajay Mitchell. My last big board, I had him at number 10. I moved him down. This is the second big board I posted on the channel. Moved him down a couple of spots. Not because I'm kind of scared off of him or anything like that. I just think there's a couple of other players that have warranted me moving them up a little bit. Ajay Mitchell for me at 13, I feel very still strongly about. I think there's a real chance he could turn into a high-quality starting guard in this league. But at the very worst, you know, he's a rotation guard coming off the bench as a bench scoring guard who can handle the rock and facilitate an offense, or just flat out being a starting point guard in the NBA. Players like him who have real patience, they win with craftiness, they win by playing off of 2 feet, taking advantage of what the defense is giving them. That's what Ajay Mitchell does very well. He's been one of my epitome guys of dribble, pass, shoot this entire draft process. He shot the ball really well this year for UCSB, over 39% from 3 on, I think, the best volume of his career. He averaged a decent number of assists, handling the ball for their offense, controlling turnovers. He had a positive assist-to-turnover ratio like you would expect. And I think defensively he competes. He can handle the ball. He had multiple ankle breakers this year as well for UCSB. Honestly, from just a highlight standpoint, if you're watching solely highlights, Ajay Mitchell would be a fan favorite if he had more recognition, got more noise and steam pre-draft. I like Ajay Mitchell's game quite a bit. Now you can say, well, the level of competition he was facing, those are some concerns, right? But at the end of the day, the hoop is 10 feet tall. The basketball is the same dimensions. The kid can play, the kid can dribble, pass, and shoot. I trust his ability to step into the NBA, make plays, make reads off of a live dribble, and with some real development, I could see him growing into a quality starting guard in the NBA in a few years. Baylor Scheierman, this is one of the tightest ranges you're going to see on my entire board. Someone who I just flat out view as a starter. He doesn't branch into the high quality starter, maybe touches it just a little bit, but he's going to be a starting level caliber player. My comp for him for 3 years now has been Joe Ingles. I have been enamored with Baylor Scheierman's game since he was at South Dakota State. The fact that he is finally in this draft and the fact that it worked out so well for him that it's a draft with a lot more questions around the top, Baylor Scheierman likely will be a first-round pick, and I still think he will be underdrafted. I have him 12th on my board because he's the most functional offensive player in this draft, arguably. And you might say, what do you mean by that? If you want someone who can operate as a movement shooter, guess what Baylor Scheierman did at Creighton? He played as a movement shooter, came off of off-ball screens all of the time, moves well without the ball, set Spain screens, set go screens, does everything from that perspective. Do you want someone who can run the pick and roll? Well, guess what? He ranked in the 100th percentile of all players coming into this draft in the pick and roll. He can handle the ball in the pick and roll. He can make reads. Do you want someone who can throw lobs? Baylor Scheierman can throw lobs. Do you want someone who can enter the ball into the post? Baylor Scheierman can do that. Do you want someone who's an elite standstill catch and shoot guy? Baylor Scheierman can do that. Do you want someone who can shoot from 25, 26, 27 feet? Guess what? Baylor Scheierman was in the top 10 in the nation in 25 plus foot made threes this past year. He is a bucket. He did everything for Creighton. He is an elite player in the college game. He's going to be very, very good in the NBA. This is like a hill I'm willing to die on. If Baylor Scheierman doesn't work in the NBA, I would be completely shocked because he is skilled. Dribble, pass, shoot. When guys can do all three of those things, they fit with anybody. They can play with anybody. They're versatile. You can use them in any type of role. Baylor Scheierman's a very good passer, a great dribbler. It'll surprise some people, but his change of direction, change of pace is very, very good. and he can shoot the ball extremely well. Shireman, I think, is a very easy, no-brainer first-round selection, and whoever gets him is going to be very, very happy. Dalton Knecht at number 11. I referenced movement shooting for Baylor Shireman. Well, you're looking at the best movement shooter in the draft in Dalton Knecht. Now, there's other shooters who shoot the ball better in a vacuum than him, but he has the highest collection of volume and quality efficiency on movement. For Tennessee, for Rick Barnes, he's coming off of screens all day, every day. He's coming off of floppy. He's coming off of pin downs. He's setting Spain screens. He's taking dribble pull-ups in transition. If he's catching the ball, he's probably shooting it. And that's something that at Tennessee, I think, was so awesome for him to get to really showcase his game on a big stage in the SEC and stand out in really impressive fashion. Now, one thing I do have a little bit of concern about, when he gets to the NBA, is his confidence going to be as high? Because his usage isn't going to be as high. At Tennessee, he was relied upon to be their primary scorer, their primary creator of offense, their primary everything. In the NBA, he won't be that. So for a player who found a lot of success playing with rhythm, playing with the ball in his hands, how does the shooting translate once it's no longer in his hands nearly as frequently? That's not a fair criticism of him. That's not something I'm really that focused on. But I did want to mention it in this video in case he struggles, especially early in his career. Don't get too concerned. Maybe it'll be a learning process for him. But I do think ultimately, yes, he's an older prospect. I'd love to see him find success early. Even if he doesn't, I still trust the skill set. I trust the shooting. I trust his athleticism and his size. I think he's just a really strong, well-rounded prospect. Devin Carter at number 10, another player who I can see kind of fitting into that high-quality starter tier, potentially, or just flat-out being starter material at the point guard spot because of his toughness, his ability to defend without fouling. He does a very good job staying attached to the offensive player, riding their hips and making plays on the basketball. Just a really fierce, tenacious defender. A lot of the things we talked about with Jamal Shead are true for Devin Carter, except he's bigger, probably a more reliable offensive player, which is why he finds himself in the top 10 on my board here in the 2024 NBA draft. As you can notice, I have a lot of guys in this class, up to possibly 18, 19 guys who could turn into high-quality starters in the NBA. And that's why I've maintained that the 2024 draft class is not that bad. Obviously, it doesn't have that number one player, that Victor Wembanyama, who last year I said could arguably become the greatest of all time, potentially, and I had him listed as a possible all-time great even before he played a single game in the NBA. I think that's very well warranted now, looking back in hindsight. There's not a player like that in this class at all. There isn't. But what there is a whole bunch of good players that are going to contribute to winning, and I think Devin Carter really exemplifies that as well. Especially, one thing I want to say, at Providence, he was the do-it-all guy. I think his skill set as a passer, a playmaker, a decision-maker, he's going to look even better in that regard when there's better talent around him, more floor spacing. I think it's just going to open up the game quite a bit more for him, especially playing around more athleticism. Number 9, I have Nikola Topic, who I think is a starting level point guard. I really love his playmaking feel. I think he's the best passer in this year's draft for sure. And I think the upside is there for him to maybe become a high-quality starter. My questions are the scoring, the three-point shooting. Obviously, those are things that he did not do extremely well, especially early in the year for Mega Basket, and then to close the year playing for Red Star. And there's injury concerns, right? He has a partial ACL tear, probably going to miss most of, if not all of his rookie season. Should that impact the team's stock in him? I don't really think that's a fair thing for him to have to deal with. Just all things considered, I think he's going to be a quality player, a quality point guard, someone with real floor general decision-making capabilities, and he's got good positional size. He can get on the glass. He can make any pass on the court. His passing is such a weapon that even if the scoring gravity never really materializes and matures, I still think he's going to be a good NBA player. Maybe not number 9 in the draft good, but I do think even if none of the other stuff really progresses a ton, he's still going to be a reliable, solid player because of his size and feel for the game, his ability to run pick and roll, and not only his ability, but he has the volume, he has the reps. He's been tasked with doing that before, so he already has done that, shown that he can, and I think coming into the NBA, the league really plays that way. I think Topic is going to find a ton of success in that style of game. Now into my top 8. Ron Holland at number 8 with some serious potential. as are the rest. Let's get into all 8 of them. I'm just gonna go for it right here. Here's the top 8. Okay. At the very top, you can see, first of all, no one with all NBA potential in this class. That is the first thing. You're also going to notice the player I have with the highest potential being my number 4 prospect, Cody Williams. We'll get to that in a second. I'm a little bit of a teaser there. The player out of these 8 with the lowest potential is Holland, and it's possible role player potential because his feel for the game is somewhat questionable. At moments, he makes fantastic reads, and you say, okay, that's a huge positive flash that makes me believe he's going to be a really good playmaker at some point down the road. And then there's also moments where he misses 3 wide open passes in a row, and you say, okay, is this guy playing with his eyes closed? That's part of my concern with Holland, but he has all of the physical tools. He can jump out of the gym. He's a freak athlete. He's got a really great defensive motor like we talked about with Ryan Dunn. Holland has a very similar motor as well. Wants to make plays, willing to make plays. He's strong, physical, and plays with a lot of defensive tenacity. And then offensively, at times he just will not be denied the rim. And that is awesome. Rim pressure, I've said it so many times already in this video, I'm sure. Holland is the exemplary rim pressure wing. When he makes up his mind he's going to go downhill, it doesn't matter if there's 1 big, 2 bigs, 3 bigs down there. He's going to get to the rim and he's going to try and finish that thing. He's going to try and dunk it on you. He's going to try and make a play at the rack. And sometimes that turns into bad charges. That turns into some really terrible turnovers. But other times, it turns into a freaking awesome play. And it gets him on the free throw line. And it makes something happen. And it brings juice to a team. That kind of situation does. So Holland, for me, you can see I have his ceiling as an all-star. I could see him hitting in that. Now, I'm not saying I confidently believe in that. Look at where I have his ceiling. I don't have it way up into the all-star tier. I have it a little bit up. So I'm a little skeptical on if he ever realizes that potential, but he is a really fun, good athlete, and I'm really excited to watch him in the NBA. Stephon Castle, another player who I have given a little bit of all-star potential to, but really I think he's going to be an impactful winner. And this is, to me, this is where the strength of the draft is. I have 8 guys who I pretty firmly believe can have high-quality starter impact on a team. And that's an impressive draft class. If you get 8 guys in a class who are really impactful, top 3 or 4 players on teams, that's a good, strong draft, in my opinion, around the top. Yes, maybe none of them are all NBA guys, but if they're all good, that's great. And I'm not guaranteeing they all will be. Obviously, I have some concerns about Stephon Castle's ceiling too, and his floor, having him as just a starter. I think for me, the biggest thing about his floor, I'm a believer in what he's going to do defensively. I think the screen navigation is very real. The positional size is elite. I love that component of his game. And I think offensively, some of my concerns are, okay, what does the shot look like? How reliable is he going to be as a finisher getting all the way to the rim? Is he going to be reliant on his floater? At times at UConn he was, but he just has this unique combination of defensive intensity, the ability to stay connected to the ball handler, navigate screens extremely well. I've already mentioned that. He stays in front of guys, keep ball in front type of defender. He's lengthy, physical around the rim. On the offensive end of the floor, he gets to the glass a bit, just makes a lot of winning plays. We talked about that earlier with Cam Spencer. Stephon Castle made a ton of winning plays as well for UConn, and even sacrificed his role a little bit to exert his effort there in those areas. So credit to him for that. It's a sign of maturity for sure, and the desire to win was very much real for Stephon Castle. I think he's going to be a fun player in the NBA. I like his playmaking feel, his vision. It just really comes down to the outside shot, which is why he is a little bit lower on my board than others. Donovan Clingan, a player who I have talked about as a very false ceiling type of guy. I have him as a high-quality starter. I know some people are going to look at that and say, well, that's really disappointing if you draft that first or second or third overall to have that guy be not even a true all-star. That might be disappointing. I don't really think so because, listen, Rudy Gobert wasn't voted as an all-star this past year. He won Defensive Player of the Year. So the value of a player, even if they don't make the all-star team, the impact on winning is more important to me. And I think Donovan Clingan, as a high-quality starter in the league, could have a real impact on winning as a rim deterrent, an elite screen setter. To me, he's very comparable to Rudy Gobert with his overall ability to play, make defensive plays, deter around the rim. Now, it's not the most sexy thing. I also think he's a better passer than Rudy Gobert, but he's less of an above-the-rim lob finisher, in my opinion, at this point in time. But Clingan has a lot of room to grow yet at this point as a player offensively. He's shown some touch, not a ton of it. He shot some threes in college, not very many of them. Not something that it makes me believe he's going to shoot a ton of threes in the NBA. But you never know how these guys are going to develop, how they're going to grow their game. Very possible he could learn that. But Donovan Clingan to me is a very safe selection, someone who I know is just flat out going to be a starting caliber center for a long time in this league. And with that being the reality, he warrants a top 5, top 10 pick in this draft very, very safely, very, very securely, because he's going to be good in the NBA, I just promise you. You'll notice I have a little bit of a gap here between number 5 and number 6. This top 5 is pretty bunched up for me, but this is how I ultimately landed on my board. I like all 5 of these players quite a bit, and I think they're all very unique from each other with the way that they play. Let's start at the very top with Alex Sarr. To me, Alex Sarr has the most upside in the draft on the defensive end of the floor. I think he could be the most unique defender in this draft. I think he could be the most special defender in this draft because at 7'1", he has tremendous lateral mobility, not only running the 3-cone, which I know some people are going to reference about Zach Edey. He does it in games, and you see it in tape against professional level players when he's playing in the NBL. He moves his feet extremely well, is able to cut off drives, recover to the rim, block shots. He has a very good standing reach at 9'4", very good wingspan at 7'4". He is a long, lengthy, athletic, mobile big man with positional versatility defensively. He's going to be able to guard wings, he's going to be able to guard bigs, and he can switch out onto guards occasionally. I love that defensive upside. Offensively, what do I like about him? Why did I ultimately land on him being my number 1 player in the class? It was the defensive side of the floor, no question. Offensively, I am concerned. He was not a great finisher at the rim. He's very reliant on finesse and touch, which makes it hard to consistently be a finisher because the value of dunking the basketball and just putting the ball actually firmly in the hoop does go a long way in being an efficient big man and efficient center in the NBA. I think for Sarr, if he wants to be a power forward, he's going to really struggle at times, but it also breathes life into his defensive upside. So if you want to be a great defensive team with Sarr, playing him as a power forward is probably your best option there. But if you want to be an elite offensive team, playing Alex Sarr offensively at the 5, I think breathes even more value to a team. So I think there's going to be a lot of questions about where he ultimately lands. I think ultimately at this point in time, it seems like the Wizards will draft Alex Sarr. We'll see about that. I do love his defensive upside. I think offensively, the pull-up game is very interesting for him as a mid-range shooter, kind of like Evan Mobley a little bit, kind of like Jaren Jackson a little bit with his physical traits that he possesses, the defensive kind of tweenerisms in his game as well. We'll see where Alex Sarr ultimately goes and who he ultimately becomes, but I did land on him being my number 1 player in the draft. Reed Sheppard I landed with as the number 2 guy in the draft for me. I do think there is a little bit of all-star potential there for Reed Sheppard. Not multi-time all-star probably. Kind of think Mike Conley. Mike Conley kind of hovered around the all-star game for a while, finally got in as kind of a little bit of a charity all-star appearance, honestly, which I don't love to say, but that's how it kind of panned out a little bit. I think Reed Sheppard can have that type of career where he's constantly averaging, around 16-7, maybe 17-6, something along those lines with great efficiency, a true impact on winning, playing on winning teams. Think about Mike Conley. Some of the best seasons in Utah Jazz basketball was with Mike Conley running the point guard. Now, that says a lot because they had John Stockton, Karl Malone for a while, but those Utah Jazz teams with Gobert, Mitchell, Ingles, they all found really good success, and Conley was a big factor in that as well. You think about Memphis, how important he was to their grit and grind era, how essential he was around Marc Gasol, Tony Allen, Zach Randolph. Mike Conley, and now in Minnesota, has had a lot of success as a winner too. He wins, and I think for me, that's something I've really just honed in on and focused on in my draft board. How are these guys going to impact winning? I ultimately don't care about their individual numbers that much. I think Reed Sheppard's going to have a huge impact on winning. I think he's going to have an all-star type of impact, and he's going to have a very high-quality starter impact for most of his career. He can dribble, pass, shoot. He's really the epitome of that in this year's draft. Shot over 50% from 3. Now he's not even a laser. I don't even have a word to describe how good of a shooter he is, especially when he sets his feet and is able to, one thing that really impressed me about Sheppard, he can toggle between on-ball, off-ball responsibilities. He's able to catch and shoot. He's able to handle the ball in the pick and roll, rise as a pull-up shooter, and he sets his feet well on step back. He just sets his feet, and he fires and he makes it. So there's a lot of value in that. He's not a home run hitter. He's not going to have the crazy highlight plays, but what he's going to constantly do is make the right decision, make the right pass, just like Mike Conley does. I think Sheppard has a little bit of that Austin Reeves in him too with that downhill creation in the pick and roll. I think Sheppard is a combination of Austin Reeves and Mike Conley. It doesn't sound like an elite player, but if you look at Mike Conley's career, you're talking about a very, 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 very good draft pick, a very good decision by Memphis back in the day, and one that if Houston, hint, hint, at pick number 3, drafts Reed Sheppard in this class, they're going to be very, very happy with the long-term result of that selection, because not only does he fit their team, but he's just flat out a really good player in a draft with a lot of questions around the top. Rob Dillingham, maybe not quite the floor that Reed Sheppard has, but I think a notably higher ceiling. Part of why his ceiling isn't maybe all NBA or this crazy level is because of his frame. Rob Dillingham, I think, has the skill set of an all NBA player, but he has that skill set, unfortunately, in a 6'1" body with a 165-pound frame. He's just very, very light, very, very slight. He's going to put up numbers, I would think, in the NBA. I think he'll turn into like an 18-8, 20-8 type of guy. I do like that a lot. I think the comp that I've really settled on, and I've heard it a couple of times in other places, has been Darius Garland. It makes sense, like from a frame standpoint, from a skill set standpoint, probably an outside-inside player where they're going to get their perimeter shot to fall, and then from there they become dynamic downhill. I think one thing I really love about Dillingham's game is the creativity in his handle, the ability to create separation consistently. He's going to be a good pick-and-roll ball handler because of his decision-making, his ability to read the floor and make passes out of that. Now, part of the issue, and it's kind of in contrast to Nikola Topic, Topic is able to make any pass on the court because of his size. Rob Dillingham doesn't have that luxury to him. So he's going to be a little bit more hamstrung by his size, but I do think his overall scoring gravity, his shot-making prowess, and the electricity, in his handle is going to be very, very impressive. And once an NBA team gets him, they put the ball in his hands and let him go to work and create, you're going to get very, very good results. Let's talk about the 4-5 conversation here between Cody Williams and Zachary Reese-Shea. This was really hard for me. Going back and forth between these two guys, I ultimately landed on Cody at 4 and Reese-Shea at 5 for a few reasons. One, I think the upside is just significantly higher with Cody Williams. He's someone who I think has real meaningful all-star potential, and if everything goes right in his development, if everything hits in his career, I think there's a chance he could become the best player in this entire draft. He's a 6'8" wing with a 7'1" wingspan, and he can create downhill. That is the most important thing in my evaluation of Cody Williams. He has downhill juice. He can get to the rim, and you might say, okay, well, what separates him from Ron Holland, who has some of that same downhill juice? Cody Williams keeps his head up, keeps his eyes up, and can make reads while attacking downhill. Ron Holland, I referenced kind of the inconsistency in his playmaking and decision-making. Cody Williams is somebody who can make the right play, make the right read a lot, and finishes through traffic extremely well. Ron Holland initiates a lot of contact. He's going to get to the free throw line more frequently probably than Cody Williams will early in their careers, but Cody Williams is extremely long, he's athletic, and he's smart, and he picks his spots well. He's got really good touch. He can finish around the rim, he can finish above the rim, he can finish right at the rim as well. So he's someone who can contort his body a bit. He's extremely long. I think his length plays really well offensively. For the most part, we usually talk about length as a defensive trait, and it mostly is. Cody Williams' length helps him get to the rim quicker. It helps him finish faster at the rim by stretching his long arms out and laying the ball up in the hoop. It just is a huge benefit to him offensively. It's something I noticed a lot on his film at Colorado, where he's just narrowly beating shot blockers at the rim. And the reason he's able to do that is because he's extending with his length, really maximizing his frame to get to the glass early as a layup finisher. And then obviously he's capable of finishing above the rim. I like the playmaking. The biggest question about Cody Williams is the shooting. He shot over 43s this year, which is over 1 a game, actually close to 2 a game. And he shot over 40%. He was really, really good as a spot-up guy, and I think his ability to attack closeouts, teams are going to probably make him shoot because they're going to be scared of his downhill driving ability, and that means he's going to be shooting a lot of open shots. He ranked in the 90th plus percentile on unguarded catch-and-shoot threes this past year in college. I'm a big believer in his game. I do think ultimately having him 4th on my board is warranted. I even considered him at number 3 over Dillingham. Just couldn't talk myself there. I've been very, very high on Dillingham for a long time, even going back before his overtime elite days with the Cold Hearts. I've been monitoring and watching Dillingham for a very long time. Really have kind of expected him to be in the top 4 or 5 in my board kind of coming into this year. Cody Williams, someone who I had on my radar as well, obviously, with his brother being Jaylon Williams. I've known who Cody Williams is for a long time, too, don't get me wrong. I've known like 95% of these players for a long time. But, you know, having the expectations coming into the year for both Dillingham and Cody, I think Cody kind of exceeded my expectations a little bit. I think Rob kind of played around my expectations. And at times even exceeded them too. So I'm very optimistic about both of these guys, and I'm very excited to see where the future takes them. And I do think whichever teams draft these guys are going to have a big impact on their careers. 5th overall, Zachary Reese-Ajay, kind of feels disrespectful having him at 5. I think he's very likely the #1 overall pick in this year's draft, and I don't think it's a bad decision for Atlanta. So that's the thing in this draft, like, notice how flat it is here, the top 8 spots. Like, it's not, last year I had, you know, remember I had Victor all the way up here, all the way down here I had like the next guys. So you have to remember, like, it's a very big difference, this draft compared to last. It's a flat draft, so if a team takes the 5th best player on my board, 1st overall, I don't think it's a terrible decision because I do think Reese-Ajay will fit well in Atlanta. He's going to guard the other team's best player pretty consistently. That's something Cody also did in college quite a bit for Colorado. And Reese-Ajay, he's got good length. He's got very, very good shooting, very reliable shooting. I think he's very contrasty to Cody Williams, who is more of a downhill finisher and then a shooter afterward. Zachary Reese-Ajay is a shooter to begin with. And you guys know how I value shooting. I think Reese-Ajay is going to be a good NBA player. My question is the all-star upside, like, does he ever realize that? Because does he become dynamic enough as a downhill finisher, a downhill player to really become that? Probably not. I just think he probably turns into a quality player, a really good starter, kind of that 3rd, 4th guy on a very good team. And that's a good thing. Like, and if you're Atlanta, you already have Trae Young. You already have one of those top 2 guys anyway. Like, you don't need Reese-Ajay to be a #1. Obviously, you would love to get another #1. It's good to have more talent than not. But Reese-Ajay, if he goes to Atlanta or wherever he goes, he's going to be a player that fits around other talent. He's going to be able to fit well on other teams. This has been my 2024 NBA Draft Big Board. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Here's one last look at the top 20 or so in the class. I had a ton of fun. I really hope you guys did as well. Let me know down in the comment section below your thoughts on these prospects and these players. I had a lot of fun recording. Thanks again, everyone. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.